So, when Edmund Kemper was released from the state hospital after the initial murders of his grandparents, he was, first, in the state hospital, he was viewed as a model prisoner. He was trained to administer psychiatric tests to the other mentally ill prisoners. And in this hospital, he was diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic. Now, during his time there, he, being able to communicate with the other prisoners, he learned from sex offenders that if you were going to commit a violent crime, sexual violent crime, such as rape, that it's best to kill the victim. That way you can get away with it. This is something that stuck with Kemper for basically until he got out when he was 21 years old. So when he got out, against the wishes of the psychiatrist in the state hospital, they said that he was not deemed fit to be reintegrated into society, but the judge thought otherwise, and he was placed under the care of his mother. Now, as previously stated by Haley, she said that Kemper and his mother did not have a very good relationship, and it didn't change. It became worse, tempers flared, and things just kind of got progressively worse with him being around his mother so much. Initially, he thought, what, I'd like to be a police officer. He always had like an infatuation with that, and he wanted to become a police to try to turn his life around. Unfortunately, due to his stature, he's 6'9", 300 pounds. He was not accepted into the police academy. They said he was too big, but he still wanted to be around the police, and he made friends with the police. He would go to this local police bar called the Jury Room. There, he would frequent, and he would just, try to get to know some of the police officers. Everyone, learned to, everyone got to know him, learned about him a little bit, but no one knew that he previously murdered his grandparents. His juvenile record was expunged, so there was no record, nothing to be traced, saying that he did commit those murders when he was 15 years old. The local police department kind of described him as a friendly nuisance. He was very curious and, just wanting to be in the mix, sort of thing. When he began committing his crimes, there was a progression. He first would pick up hitchhikers. Hitchhiking was very prevalent in the 1970s, and being around a large university, there was plenty of hitchhikers. So he would drive around looking for potential victims before knowing that they were potential victims. So he would pick them up, take them to their destination, and leave it at that. But soon he began to realize that he felt these urges. In his words, he called them zappies, where he would feel sexual urges and violent urges at the same time on his body. His genitals, he would say that he felt the zappies when he was getting ready to pick somebody up. When he finally does get prepared enough to pick up a potential victim and, go through with a more violent ending, he he starts to prepare. He starts putting rope in his car, plastic bags, um, something to, handcuffs. He got handcuffs, and that's when it really begins. He he states in his own words that when he would argue with his mother, these urges for violent sexual tendencies were more prevalent, they were harder to resist. So he began his murder spree with two young women in May 1972, and he murdered six college students over the course of 11 months. These crimes were especially heinous. There was the dismemberment, there was the decapitation of the corpses, and then ultimately the sodomization and the necrophilia. Necrophilia being having sex with the corpses. He didn't really take the initial advice that the sex offenders in the mental hospital were telling him. He did it quite the opposite. Instead of raping the victim and then killing the victim, he would kill the victim and then have sex with the dead body. This there's the crimes that he committed to these women. He was using those women as a vessel to get courageous enough to finally commit his final two murders, which were the murders of his mother and the murders of his mother's best friend. When he committed those two murders, he immediately took off. He left a note for the police, and he drove 18 hours straight, about 1,000 miles, to Colorado, where he was anticipating a manhunt. He had multiple weapons in his car with lots of ammunition, anticipating a huge FBI manhunt. But to his surprise, nobody believed that he committed these crimes. He called the police and he confessed, and they just, they knew who he was, Big Ed, Gentle Ed. And they didn't believe him at first. So he waited a few hours and he called back, and then he stated, no, I did commit these murders and the bodies are here. Should I just wait for you guys to come pick me up? And that's what he did. He turned himself in. He waited. There was no struggle. He was arrested. And at the trial, he said the reason why he committed the murders were because he wanted to have them as his possessions. So that's like something that is common with serial killers. It's the power, the high, the adrenaline from having the power over somebody. And like other serial killers, he kept trophies. In this case, one of the victims that he had murdered, he decapitated, and he placed her head facing his mother's window. Now, the reason behind that is because it's pretty morbid. He said that his mother always wanted to be looked up to, so he was obliging her wishes. And learning about this specific crime and his reasoning behind the crimes is pretty sickening. It was really tough to just read, and even listening to him speak about it, because he was very vocal. Once he was in prison, he was like a celebrity. Journalists wanted to talk to him. The FBI wanted to talk to him because he was very vocal about his crimes and the reasonings behind them. And it was insight to the mind of a serial killer. So his calmness, the fact that he was just so relaxed, describing everything, it was interesting and fascinating at the same time for the psychology of it. And Amon is actually going to go ahead and highlight the psychology of these crimes, so you'll go ahead and see him next.